The reason why I love consumer products, in particular food and beverage, is because it's so creative and the branding is so strong and the packaging is so strong. You'll notice I don't actually talk about the products themselves. I'm assuming that all tastes great. The problem is you can't patent a recipe and you can't patent a food. Obviously, the emphasis has to go to branding.
What's up, ladies and gents? This is Alex Osterly, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Food Marketing Nerds. Now, whether you're thinking about launching a new CPG brand or looking for ways to differentiate a product that's already on the shelves, today's guest is a wealth of knowledge in the natural food startup space. We're talking with Pete Truby, who's the founder of Salazon Chocolate. From working at Mrs. Meyer's when it was in its early stages to being one of the first employees at Honest Tea, Pete has been a sponge, just soaking up information and knowledge when it comes to startups, entrepreneurship, and the natural foods industry. So today you're going to get to hear how he's applied that knowledge to bootstrap Salazon into a brand with national distribution. In our interview, you're going to learn why Pete believes branding is equally or more important than product value, what the pros and cons of taking outside investments are, how to compete in-store with competitors who have deeper pockets than you, and plenty more. And as you'll hear about in a minute, Pete teaches at a local university, so I think you guys are really going to enjoy the way that he approaches my questions. So let's get after it.
Welcome to the Food Marketing Nerds Podcast, where we talk marketing, branding, and social media with the smartest minds in the business. Here's your host, Alex Osterly.
Pete, thanks so much for coming on to Food Marketing Nerds.
Happy to be here, Alex.
So can you tell me a little bit more about yourself and your background that led you to starting Salazon Chocolate?
Sure. I've always been pretty interested in being an entrepreneur, but I didn't have a particular area that I knew I would start a business or try to be successful. What I did know about myself is that I was not a math and science or tech person. So when I grew up, I graduated high school in 95. In case you don't know, that's the internet boom. So like when I was in high school and college and right out of college, like any startup that anybody had ever heard of that was doing anything was in tech. And I wasn't a tech guy, but I'm like highly interested in startups. So I'm like, well, what do I do? So I was just kind of like looking around and was in a natural food store. And I tell everybody in natural foods, I wasn't a natural foods person, but I picked up a bottle of Honest Tea. And it really struck me. I really liked the branding. I liked that it was so different. And I turn it over, and the bag of it says Bethesda, Maryland. Now, I was in Annapolis at the time, which is, I don't know, it's probably a good hour away from Bethesda. But I was so shocked that, I thought it would say Colorado or Vermont or Maine or something. I didn't think it was going to say Maryland. And I said, well, this is my one chance. And it was obvious they had just started the company. You could tell it was like a year or two old or whatever. And I was like, wow, so this is a startup. And it just dawned on me. I'm like, wait a minute. There weren't a whole lot of consumer products starting up around that. And I happened on this bottle of Honest Tea, and I saw that it was in Maryland. And then I just told myself that one way or another, I was going to find my way into that company, because I knew that if I could get into that startup, then I could just learn. And I didn't want to know about tea. I didn't want to know about food. I didn't care about natural foods. I didn't care that it was organic. I liked the branding, and I liked that it was a startup that wasn't tech. And that kind of led me down this whole rabbit hole.
And so what were some of the biggest takeaways that you picked up that helped you succeed in your current business?
So this is a good story for people that are ever interested in how to find a job. Because a lot of people ask me now sort of, I want to work at this. I want to, or what do I do when I get out of, because as you know, I also teach in college. How do I get this job or that job? And I say, well, I like to tell my Honest Tea story because, in my opinion, that's the best way to get a job, is find a place you want to work and find a way in there, rather than going, applying online, where you're competing against, to be honest, people that are probably have better resumes than you. Don't even get into that fight, because you're most likely going to lose unless your resume is just off the charts. Rather than that, you just find a way into a company that you think is really cool or you think fits. And there's a number of ways to do that. I'll just tell you the way that I found my way into Honest Tea. So I emailed them and I said, I love the product. I'll work for free, which you can do when you're young. So also called internships. But at the time, I wasn't asking for an internship. I was just saying I'll work for free. He writes back, to his credit, Seth wrote back and was like, I appreciate the enthusiasm. We don't really have anything here. Occasionally we have need for people to do demos, which at the time I didn't really know what that was. So in the meantime, that wasn't, and I did need a job. This is post college. So while I'm keeping up this sort of email relationship with Seth, the founder of Honest Tea, and occasionally doing demos for them on the weekend, I worked briefly for a PR firm. So I kind of, figured out what PR was all about, figured out I didn't want to do it. And then I got a job in marketing for an Australian wine company. And again, I'm emailing Seth because that's my dream job, is demoing for Seth, apparently at this stage of my life. But I did get this job in marketing for an Australian wine company, which was really cool. They're called BRL Hardy & Sons. They're now owned by Constellation Brands. This was the actual wine company's U.S. operations, and they didn't know where to go, so they set up an office in D.C. They were looking for somebody in marketing. I joined them, and I did that, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 months, and really enjoyed it and could have actually seen myself in wine. But it dawned on them after that amount of time. Number one, Constellation Brands was getting interested in buying them. And two, they were like, what are we doing in D.C.? So they moved to California. Right about the time they moved to California, Seth, who'd known my way over the top exuberance about doing demos, which nobody likes to do demos, said, we may have something for you in sales. I wasn't necessarily a sales guy. I'm more of a marketing guy. But again, for me, I was trying to get into the company. I was trying to learn a non-tech startup. I was sort of willing to do whatever that took. Then right after that Australian wine company, I joined Seth in sales. And then where they needed, and again, this is kind of how life works, but as a beverage company, you either have regular beverage, what they call DSD, or you have distributor or natural side beverage. And he needed help on the natural side. So then that sort of put me down this path, working with him on the natural side and another lady that sort of ran their natural food sales. So when I started with Honest Tea, they had 5 people in the office. Last time I went and saw him, I think there was 105. Wow. This is all way, way before they sold to Coke. He was in distribution, but it was a struggle. So first of all, I learned the food industry. I also learned, the startup industry, and I learned sort of different ways to sort of try to get your business off the ground. And the Honest Tea way is one way. It's not the only way. In the end, it wasn't the way that I did with Salazon. Well, what I learned from Seth, I like to tell people, is that he was relentlessly optimistic. You could have his house falling around him, and he would still think that this thing's standing. It's not falling. You guys are wrong. He was crazy optimistic. He's also a very bright guy. That can't help but rub off on you, particularly when you're interested in startups like I was and interested in entrepreneurship. And there were rough areas where, he would have to go back to his co-founder and borrow money. And, we were down to the last dime, and he'd have to run out and raise more money. Or we had a recall one time where there was actual shards of glass sealed inside the bottles. Ooh. And he wouldn't mind me telling this because it was a public recall, because we had to do an FDA recall on it. I mean, these are some of the challenges you get. It was a crazy time. So it was almost, intensive learning. And the other trick was that I knew going in was I was going to, and this is another, for people that are interested in sort of in startups, and it's not for everybody, but one of the pluses is that you will invariably get chances to do things that you have no experience in and no right trying to do, such as product development, or design when you're not a designer, or right. Or in my case, managing the Midwest region for a natural foods brand when, I think I'd been there for like 6 months or something. We ended up losing a regional sales manager, we're still in Maryland. So I was managing the Midwest way earlier than anybody would get a chance to. But that in turn helps you get the experience. Eventually you either figure it out or you don't, and you can go on and use that to your advantage. I learned a lot, and I enjoyed myself. And then I did, I will admit, at that point, did really fall in love with the natural foods industry and the foods industry in general, because there was so much creativity in it and so much branding. It turned out that is really the place to be in consumer products if you're interested in startups and branding. And then I ended up really liking just the food and the people too.
So something that you said kind of caught my interest, that there are multiple ways to start up a natural foods company. Honest Tea did it one way. You did it a different way with Salazon. Can you kind of explain the differences between the Honest Tea startup method versus Salazon and why you went the direction you did?
Yeah, well, they couldn't be any more different, but it does not that one's better than the other. Seth's probably better. I mean, he and Coke can sit around and not argue that. What I saw mainly was he was forced to spend, from me watching, I don't know the whole truth, we can ask him, but it looked like 90% of his time raising money.
Mm-hmm.
And it was super stressful because he was trying to grow really big. I wouldn't say really big, really fast. I would say he was trying to grow really big as fast as possible. And I can get into more of why I do think that that's sometimes really needed in food. So I got it, but it was constantly about raising money. And then here's the trick. When you're always raising money, you're always going to have to deal with investors.
Mm-hmm.
And there's variations between it. But to be honest, I would say that honesty is on the far end of the spectrum of the highly leveraged with equity, always trying to raise money, always dealing with investor, all the way down to me where I'm bootstrapped and all the way in between.
Mm-hmm.
And it really depends on how fast you want to grow. What do you actually want to spend your time on, 9 to 5 or, whatever, 9 to 2 a.m. It's a personal thing. And how big you think the brand could be, how big you think that the exit opportunity could be, when the exit opportunity could be. There's any number of different ways to do it. It didn't fit my personality to do it the Seth way. Obviously, it fit his. And again, I don't know if there's a right or wrong. Maybe I will sell to Hershey and make a bunch of money. Maybe I won't. But I don't know if I did it the wrong way. And you'd have to ask Seth if he thought, in the end, would he do anything different,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. And it's an interesting industry as far as the profit margins and the way that you grow when you're a younger company. If you are going for that rapid expansion, and hopefully large exit, you do have to show those high percentages in growth rate, and to do that, you need outside money. So it's tough.
I've been in the industry for a long time, and I've seen a lot of new companies. I mean, I'm way the outlier on that. I don't know if I know anybody that, and this is not me bragging, I don't know anybody that's had as much distribution as I've had without taking outside money. Everybody else I know, everybody has taken some, either sophisticated or institutional money. So because, like you mentioned, just because of the pressures of the industry are so tough, and the margins are bad, and they're particularly bad when you start up. But if we get to my next job, which was Mrs. Meyer's, you'll see that she is one of those in-betweeners. It wasn't Seth and it wasn't me. And to be honest, that's probably the best success case of something I've seen. Somebody just come in, make a mark, change a category, exit, do really well. Mrs. Meyer's is a good example of an in-between.
What would you say has been, aside from your learnings working at Mrs. Meyer, at Honest Tea, what have been some of the catalysts to you being able to bootstrap and still have that broad distribution?
Well, bootstrap is just because I'm stubborn, to be honest with you. And by bootstrap, I took in a very small friends and family raise, basically my brother. Again, there was no sophisticated and no outside money and no money since I started in 2009. Well, some of it was because I was okay with growing slow. Some of it was because I knew what I was doing in natural foods, and I knew enough people. Some of these guys that have a great idea, I always say, okay, we've got grandma's sauce recipe and it's great, right? And there's two lawyers in New York and they have grandma's sauce recipe and they're going to take over the natural foods world, be the next Rayo's or something. The problem is they most likely didn't come from natural foods or even food or probably even consumer packaged goods. So they're going to have to pay more just because of the steep learning curve of how to get into distribution, how to get some sales. So, okay, I can save some money there because, I was a national sales manager. I've been a regional sales manager. I've done marketing. Okay, so I don't need to, either hire those people or pay the learning fee, if you will, and I can kind of figure it out. I know some buyers. And so it was sort of a combination of being stubborn, knowing the industry really well before I started, not just sort of well, and having a product that at the time was quite different, so it was easy to add. Now, not so much, but, welcome to food and beverage.
Mm-hmm. So as far as learnings that you took away from your past experience to what actually led you to start Salazon, what were some of the main things that you focused on when you were first deciding to start the company?
Well, first I needed an idea. I was comfortable working, for these other startups. I basically worked for 3 consecutive startups before starting Salazon, trying to learn the industry and just kind of waiting for the right idea to hit. So I was just comfortable learning and waiting because you really can't do it without the right idea. And by the right idea, I mean, you have to have the right differentiation from competitors or it's just not going to work. You have to be able to walk into a buyer's office and they're going to say, okay, well, what makes your product different? Call it an elevator spiel, call it whatever you want. But, that's the main thing. So, and I'd had some ideas before, but, I don't know. And this is the other thing. It's like, you'll know you have the right idea when there's not even like a choice. All the other ideas, I'd be like, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I'll do it. Maybe I won't. Well, then it's not the right idea. Mm-hmm. When I came up with the idea for salted chocolate, I just knew it. And I knew I was going to try it. I didn't know if there'd be a market for it, but I just knew that was the one. So to take you back, I'm in and out grocery stores kind of for my living, right? And the areas that I liked the most in food is I like cold beverages, like ready to drink, like Honest Tea's category, and I like chocolate. They were the 2 most interesting categories to me. So when I worked at Mrs. Meyer's, okay, she did a great job, but it's cleaning, and she really changed natural foods, the cleaning set. But I didn't love the set, so I'd go, make sure Mrs. Meyer's is good. And then, but for inspiration on sort of who was doing really creative stuff and what was different, beverages is number 1. Beverages, a lot of times you'll find the newest, the most creative, the most competitive set in the natural foods grocery store is the beverage set. So I like to look at what's happening there because those people are going for broke and it's competitive and it's hard to maintain and it's creative. So I kind of would just go check that out, try new drinks. But I also like chocolate because I felt like it was heading that way. So those were the 2 sets I kept an eye on. In the back of my head, I'm like, oh my God, I never want to do a beverage. It's just, it's just brutal. And I'll tell anybody that, including my buddies at Be More. Beverages is the worst category. It's also the best in some way, in the ways that I was just explaining. But I really like chocolate. And I felt like it was going to turn into something. So I'm taking you back to 2008 now. So don't think of the chocolate set you just saw last week. This is a little while ago. And I was a fan of chocolate too. I used to take dark chocolate with me hiking. I just travel with it. So, the thing that I would buy when I left the store after checking on an account was usually chocolate or a beverage, and that's it. I wasn't really buying anything else. So at the same time, there was the salted caramel craze. This is right around 08, 07, 08, salted caramels became a thing, popularized by France in the United States. Salted caramels actually come from France, but they're not super old. It's more like the 80s. And they were like literally the square caramels, 98% sugar and topped with a little sea salt. And so that became a trending flavor. Well, that's fine. There's a lot of trending flavors like chili lime, blah, blah, blah. But what happens with ideas is that it can kind of fester in your brain or whatever. I liked the idea of a salted confection. What I didn't like was salted caramels. It's too sweet. It's not for me. And so I just kind of mulled that over, and I had chocolate. And I used to take, I'm also kind of a salty guy, so I eat pretzels or whatever. And salted chocolate covered pretzels do exist, and there's some salt there, but that's not what I was talking about. And I just, after mulling it over enough, I'm like, why isn't there just, like the salted caramels, just chocolate with a little bit of sea salt, which to me was so not to sound corny, but it was so beautiful in its simplicity. I wasn't coming up with some crazy product that, had quinoa and, matcha, and, you know what I mean?
Crickets.
Yeah, crickets. It was just a chocolate bar with salt, and it wasn't there. It didn't exist. And I'll go to my grave saying this. That's when I was like, not only did I like the idea, I loved the simplicity of it. That's just what attracts me to, the best ideas. So then I was like, okay, well, I love this idea. I love chocolate, but I don't know anything about it. So I had to figure that out. But it wasn't a choice. I knew it when I looked for salted chocolate and it wasn't there. So, I had this idea. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to brand around salted chocolate. I'm not going to come up with a chocolate bar and have it salt. I'm like, it's going to be a salted chocolate brand. So that was the idea. So when I launched, it was still the first salted chocolate bar with just chocolate and salt. And I'm still the only brand, and that's all I do. But that'll probably stay that way, because who the hell would do just a brand of salted chocolate? So coming into the buyers, and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you can tell me you have 1,000,000 chocolates, and I know you will, but you can't tell me you have salted chocolate because it wasn't there. And I know you don't have a brand that's all they do. I knew some people in the industry, and I was able to get in the door, and I had a product that I thought was different. So they certainly gave it a chance, to their credit. But that allowed me to sort of get the distribution. I had some core. I know the margins are horrible, but I could kind of deal. And I was okay with growing slow. So that allowed me to not have to raise money. And I'm not saying I was making a ton, but I also know how to sort of run it lean. But that allowed me to sort of do what I was able to do.
That's it's crazy to hear that you had the first salted chocolate bar, because you look at the shelves now and there's 20. I don't know if there's that many, but there's a lot. And
there's a lot. And that's what I love and hate about the industry. The reason why I love consumer products, in particular food and beverage, is because it's so creative, and the branding is so strong, and the packaging is so strong. And you'll notice I don't actually talk about the products themselves, like the actual taste of blah, blah, blah. I'm assuming that all tastes great. The problem is you can't patent a recipe, and you can't patent a food, and I can't patent salted chocolate. So that's one reason why you talk to a whole group of people, out in California, and they're going to hate this industry, because you can't protect anything, and anybody can copy anything. And guess what? If salted chocolate tastes good, there's going to be 50 salted chocolate SKUs. The number one SKU in the natural foods is Chocolate Love Salted Almond. It's not my salted SKU, and it was certainly launched after I did. But I'm kind of proud to say the number one SKU in the chocolate industry, in natural foods, is salted. So again, that's kind of what I love and hate about it. So you can't protect it. So what becomes most important for all these companies, if you can't protect any of your recipes or ideas, which you can't, then obviously the emphasis has to go to branding. Because you know what you can protect? You can protect trademarks. You can protect logos. You can certainly protect your brand. You can certainly grow your brand and brand equity. And that's, in the end, what is valuable. But it almost has nothing to do with the product itself, which is why some people have a hard time, getting their head around this industry. But it's also kind of why I love it. And in the end, people with much bigger pockets kind of pushing me around in the chocolate space, particularly, and coming out with all their salt, that's fine. It's still why I love the industry. It's who can make a better product, but it's more, who can make a better brand.
As far as approaching building a brand, are there any key fundamentals that you make sure that you focus on, or that you focused on to make sure that Salazon had a lasting brand?
Yeah, don't make as many mistakes as I did. That's my number one advice. The weird thing is, Alex, branding is what I consider myself good at, but I made a ton of mistakes. So if somebody comes to me and they want to get into natural foods, and then, they have grandma's sauce, right? Immediately they want to talk to me for hours about the sauce, right? And immediately I tell them I don't care about the sauce. I'm assuming the sauce is good. Otherwise, why would you be trying to create a company about it? I don't want to try it. I don't want to talk about the sauce, because what happens is they end up going down the wrong road, where they're too product focused and not brand focused enough. Who's going to do your design? Oh, my cousin's a designer. Okay, well, you got to stop them there. Don't go to your cousin, the designer. Find somebody that knows how to do packaging design. And not only that, there's a bunch of different houses that specialize in consumer packaged good design, but is that who you want? Maybe you hire somebody that's in the outdoor industry to do your design, but just find the right professional designer. Don't go to your cousin. And then think long and hard if there's any way that the package can be different. The jar itself. Okay, we got the sauce. Are you going to put it in, just a regular jar, tall jar, plastic, glass? Maybe the top can be different. Anything that could be different, it'd be helpful if it was could make it more useful. But that's part of the brand. Okay, then once we have, a professional designer, hopefully we can come up with some kind of package that's different, that's going to make it stand out a little bit. And then, of course, you have to tell a story in it. And I'm not going to go on and on, because anybody that knows anything about branding knows that you're trying to tell a story and create an emotional connection. And that's really what you're looking for with a brand is somebody attaches emotion to a name or symbol, right? So really where the value is focusing on sort of how to get that branding to communicate what kind of emotion you want that person to have about the product. And I know all that, and I've taught it, and I still made a ton of mistakes. But really what I was trying to do was create a brand that somebody felt like was really trying to just be itself and own its small little place in the world, if you will. I don't even make milk chocolate. All I do is salted dark chocolate, and all that brand is. So I wanted them to know the story of like this little company that's still little, actually, that started this trend. So it almost helps me that all these people came in and jumped on it, because I want people to see, this little company that, kind of gets beaten around. They were actually the first person to do the salted chocolate, and here's how they came up with it. And really, they don't do anything else. They're just like happy doing one thing. And it may not be good for somebody that's trying to invest in me because I'm sort of, that's what I want the brand to be about, is almost like proud of how niche it is. But that's what I was going for with the branding. I just made some mistakes along the way with packaging and whatnot. But there is emotion in the brand, and I did some things correctly. I did some things poorly, but we all learn, right?
So can you tell maybe one of your bigger mistakes that you can point to and say, I wish I would have done that differently, and it would have made my life a ton easier?
Yeah, just I tinkered too much with the design. Well, number one, I use my brother. It's my cardinal rule, right? He's a good designer, but don't use your brother. I don't care how good the family is. Just don't do it. And then I just tinkered with the design too much. And I struggled with the fact that I really didn't want to be like every other chocolate bar out there. And like if it's cherry, guess what they have on the label? Like a giant cherry. And if it's almond, guess what they have on the label? A bunch of almonds. Like I was trying to just make it different. So I knew what I was fighting against, but I think I just went too far and confused too many consumers. And then when I sort of went back and forth with the packaging, well, you know what that does? It just confuses them more, because even if you have the worst design in the world, there can be a point when consumers just are attached to that, and you should just stick with it because that's what they've come to know. You know what I mean?
So as far as the branding goes and getting the message out to your consumers or to potential consumers outside of the packaging, what have you seen be the most effective throughout your, not just Salazon, but with the past companies that you've worked with?
I mean, obviously everybody you talk to will say demos. To me, demos help, but they're also super expensive. And by now, you know that I'm cheap, and it's really hard to have them pay off the way that you would want. What is more important is merchandising. So that's where you are on the shelf. So for me, I'm going to be, okay, I want to be in the chocolate set. I want to be at eye level, and, I want a sort of a brand block. So I'd like to have maybe like 4 or 5 cases together. Or say Mrs. Meyer's was a good example. So it's eco-friendly household cleaning, like a competitor to 7th Generation. And her sort of claim to fame, or what she really brought to the set, was a high-end option. She was using high-end essential oils, almost makeup or, cosmetic quality essential oils, and putting them in cleaning products. Nobody had ever done that. In fact, it was crazy to do it because they're really expensive. So she would use these high-end essential oils with sort of great aromas and put them into cleaning products. Again, it had never been done. So the user experience, this is one, the user experience was just off the charts, because people would go to wash their dishes and had never sort of had that before, and there'd be emotion attached to it. I used to hate, doing the dishes, and that changed that for me, or blah, blah, blah. This is how people would come attached to it. So she had product innovation, which was great. And then on top of that, design was good, kind of like an old school brandy design, kind of text heavy, named after her mom. Okay, I get that. That was strong too. And she hired a very strong designer. And then what I thought really she did to grow the brand at a retail level, which is more what you're talking about, is in the past, the set had always been dishwashing liquid goes with dishwashing liquid, and the laundry soap goes with the laundry soap, and the countertop cleaner goes with, so your brand is all spread out. Well, Monica was way more stubborn than I would, and just would not put it into a store unless they put all of Mrs. Meyer's stuff together in what's called a brand block. And they're like, well, we don't do that. The dish soap goes down here and blah, blah, blah. And you basically all be separated. But if you ever saw Mrs. Meyer's all together, it comes across as a super strong brand when they're all next to each other. The colors fit really nicely. So she said, okay, well, we don't do that. We're trying to grow this brand, and people need to see it as a brand because it's new. So then she was like, okay, fine. Well, we can't go in the set. We'll do a display. So then they would do these freestanding displays separate from the cleaning set, but at least she could be brand blocked. Well, the risk there is that, okay, you're not in the cleaning set, but the plus is it really does seem like its own brand. And then when you have your own display, okay, well, that can have a header card, and that's growing the brand. And that's the importance of merchandising, so somebody needs to run across it. They need to see, wait a minute, this is a new brand that I've never seen before. And what is it doing? Okay, well, it's got lavender, this, and lemon verbena countertop spray. And they'll quickly put two and two together that, this is a premium option in the cleaning set with great aromas. Okay, now I know what this brand is. Whereas before, I don't know if they would have known that. So merchandising's key. Any off-shelf placement, really, that's what you have to fight for. Because if I can get a display of Salazon that's off the regular set, now I don't want to lose my place in chocolate, right? So I want to keep that. But any off-shelf placement where you're trying to break up the concentration of the consumer, because otherwise you just kind of get faded into the background. But off-shelf breaks up their concentration. So then all of a sudden, if you see a fall display that the stores will do, and maybe my pumpkin bar is part of that, they might have been to Whole Foods once a week and bought chocolate once a week and still had never seen Salazon. But if I make it into that pumpkin display, they'll be like, oh, what's this brand? So just to give you a different answer than probably some of the other ones you hear, I mean, I like to focus on merchandising a lot and how that can affect it. And then, of course, it's, just social media.
And yeah, that is a different perspective. A lot of people will say demoing is the way to go if you want to get your brand out there.
I figured you would hear that. And it's good. It's just, I don't know. The ROI on it is tough for me.
So speaking of which, social media is often really difficult to quantify ROI.
Yeah.
Are you guys able to, or what, is there something that you're measuring to gauge the effectiveness of social media?
No, but we also don't spend a ton of money on it. So, that's the key. It's free. Well, it's not free, but, we don't spend a ton on SEO, and it's not like we're spending a ton on Facebook ads, and Facebook ads aren't that expensive anyway. So no, I'm like everybody else. Do I really know the ROI on it? No, other than if you're going by likes or follows or whatnot. And you can see, where traffic's being driven to your website. But I do know, and I'm confident in saying that it's an important part of growing the brand. I also like events. I think event sponsorships can sometimes be really cheap, sometimes just be in kind. We've done a lot of things where I think it's my target market, and target market's a whole nother conversation. But, if you're confident in your target market and you trust it, if you think your target market's at this concert and they're willing to put you on the display for just donating, let's say, bars for, all the VIPs, or, there's very few times I've really had to do cash. I'll do free chocolate for a lot of things, events and aspects where I think it can get the word out, or I think those people might in turn tweet about it or Instagram it.
So with the chocolate space getting, especially the salted chocolate, that niche, obviously there's some bigger players that are coming in and producing a similar product. It's not the original, but is there any way aside from social media and doing these events that you do now to differentiate and get the word out there that you guys are different and we're the original?
Product-wise, for a while I was really stressing the original salted chocolate. I don't really stress it that much just because that's, to be honest, it's kind of wordy to put on the bar to say the original salted chocolate. We'll put it on the back somewhere. But I'm telling you, every person that you may interview will have this same issue. All of these products, if they can't be copied directly, they can be really easily copied close and indirectly. It's just a challenge in the food industry. And it's our challenge to, either just grow the loyalty. I mean, there are still differences. If we want to get down to the product, our bars are all still hand sprinkled with sea salt. I'm pretty sure nobody else can do that or would do that because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And the reason we do that is because, in my opinion, it tastes better. So when you have the salt in the chocolate, number one, you have to use more salt to taste it, and you don't quite get the texture and the sort of combination of when salt is used on it. Just like salt, when it's used in your household is generally considered best as a finishing ingredient, meaning like a little bit, right before you plate the dish or right when you plate the dish. And the idea is to bring out flavors, and that's the way you do it, is as a finishing ingredient. So that's how we use it on the chocolate. Also, chocolate itself, I maintain, is very good. So like, I'm still confident in that if I can get people, if they tried two salted chocolate bars right by each other, I think they would like mine better. The problem is, again, like you said, I'm going up against, really tough competitors with deeper pockets and more shelf space. And, it's just easier for them to get that loyalty first. And it's always hard to win that back. So, but there are still things I can do on the product side. I can, I came out with a pumpkin IPA spiced salted chocolate. And we're all small companies in natural foods compared to like Hershey and whatnot, but I'm small in natural foods. So one thing I can do is just be more creative with the flavors, and I can still stand out, and I am still the only like all salted brand. So if I can, still have creative flavors, really what we're focusing on now from the product side is more seasonal offerings that are kind of off the wall. So I think that can grow the brand and still be different enough. And then of course I'm just, I need to fight to be known as the salted chocolate brand. And that's an everyday, all day, in the store, online. If I'm known as these, whether or not you like it or not, I should be known as, that's the salted chocolate brand. Whether you like Uggs or not, and Uggs somebody could easily copy Uggs, Ugg the boots. Mm-hmm. I like to bring them up because, they are what they are. And can other companies make furry boots? Yeah, you're damn right. Other companies can make furry boots, but they're known for what they're known for, and that's kind of what I want Salazon to be. I'm certainly okay if you can take this away from the interviews, that I'm okay being like a one-trick pony, in that all we do is salted chocolate, because I think in a low barrier to entry, industry like we're in my opinion, that's the best way to succeed, is be good at one thing and, make it your thing and do it the best. And I still say we have the best salted chocolate. There's just a lot of it out there now.
You obviously have your hands full with Salazon. You teach at a university. How do you, is there anything that you do on a regular basis to help you stay productive and on top of your stuff? I really try to do the, don't check your email thing, and because emails will derail you. Finding good people to help, that's also important. And people that I trust. Is there any books that you recommend to people that you know in marketing or your students? Yeah, my standard ones. I do like the 4-Hour Workweek. Tim Ferriss has some good stuff, and he's very prolific. But the first half of the 4-Hour Workweek really helped me a lot. One of my favorite marketing books is called The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. Al Rees, I believe, is the author. I like The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team for management style, and just sort of, that's about it off the top of my head. Blue Ocean Strategy is a strategy I like. So as a business owner, do you subscribe to the 4-Hour Workweek? Do you think that's ever possible? No, I don't. And that's my point that I tell people. It's like, don't read it like that. But what he's trying to do is get you to think about things in a different way. Pete, thank you so much for coming onto the show. I can definitely tell that you have that teaching side, because there's a lot of things that you taught me, and I'm sure our listeners gained a lot of knowledge from you as well. Anytime. So where can people go to find out more about Salazon and what you guys have going on? Salazon Chocolate, or salazonchoc.com. Facebook, Salazon Chocolate. Instagram, Salazon Choc. So it's kind of short for chocolate. So SALAZONCHOC. And if you just do contact at Salazon Choc, that goes to me. So if anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to reach out. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Pete. All right. Thanks, Alex. We'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening to the Food Marketing Nerds Podcast. For interview transcripts or to download your free social media ebook, check out foodmarketingnerds.com.